There are 10,000 ways to die in the 41st millennium, but only one way to truly live, to serve perfection itself. That was the creed of the Emperor's children, once the most glorious of all the Emperor's Space Marine legions. Before their fall, they embodied every ideal of the Imperium: discipline, beauty, and unflinching loyalty. They were warriors sculpted in the image of divine artistry, their armor gleaming violet and gold beneath the light of distant suns. Their every movement, every strike, was a symphony of precision. To witness them march was to see beauty given form. To fight beside them was to believe in humanity's ascension. But perfection, like all precious things, corrodes under the weight of desire. I tell you this not as a legend, but as a warning. For in the Imperium, the line between devotion and obsession is razor thin, and the Emperor's children were the first to bleed upon it. If you crave more tales of glory and corruption in the dark millennium, strike the subscribe rune and lend your strength to this archive. The Emperor protects those who stand vigilant, even in the face of damnation. The story of the Emperor's children begins not with madness, but with pride. Reborn from near extinction during the Great Crusade, they were the only legion to bear the Emperor's personal sigil, the Palatine Aquila, across their armor. It was a mark of unmatched honor, bestowed upon them for their relentless dedication to excellence. They were artisans of war. Their weapons were not tools. They were instruments. Every campaign they fought was a masterpiece in motion. Every victory a canvas painted in blood and light. Their pre-march, Fulgrim, embodied this spirit completely. His every word inspired awe. His very presence radiated confidence. He saw war not as barbarism, but as performance, the grand stage upon which humanity would prove its superiority to all lesser races. When he spoke, even Astartes from other legions listened, captivated. To him, perfection was not a goal, it was the only acceptable state of being, and his sons followed that creed with absolute devotion. On the world of Chemos, where Fulgrim was found, beauty was a forgotten luxury. It was an industrial husk, stripped of color and joy. Yet from this wasteland, the pre-march forged his legion into paragons of refinement. Where other legions saw war as necessity, the Emperor's children saw it as art. Their armor shimmered, their banners glowed with meticulous design, and their every motion was choreographed precision. They trained not just for efficiency, but for elegance. Their bolters were polished, their armor plates engraved with subtle filigree, their marches accompanied by hymnals composed by warrior musicians. In those days, their obsession seemed harmless, even admirable. They became the Emperor's favorite sons, the example to which all others aspired. But beneath that shining veneer, something darker stirred. When perfection becomes an idol, even the purest hearts grow hollow. During the compliance of Kallax, Fulgrim's legion achieved what most deemed impossible: a flawless campaign. Not a single casualty, not a single misstep. Yet, when the last enemy's stronghold fell, Fulgrim felt no satisfaction. He saw only the imperfections, the symmetry of his battle lines slightly marred. The enemy's surrender not as poetic as it could have been. His officers noticed it too. What had once been discipline became fixation. Veteran apothecaries began experimenting with combat stimulants to improve reaction time. Artificers modified armor joints to move with unnatural grace. Warriors began dueling one another for the thrill of mastering motion, not for training. Each sought the impossible, that one perfect strike, that one perfect note of victory that would echo forever. And so began the Emperor's children's descent. Slow and almost imperceptible at first, they still fought loyally for the Imperium. They still praised the Emperor's name. But whispers followed them, that their devotion was no longer to the master of mankind, but to the mirror that reflected their own beauty. Fulgrim himself began commissioning sculptures of himself, works that depicted him as a demigod. His speeches grew more elaborate, filled with poetic imagery and impossible standards. When he looked upon his sons, he saw not brothers in arms, but instruments, tools through which his dream of absolute perfection would manifest. Their rise was meteoric, their flaw invisible, and it would take only the faintest nudge from the warp to twist admiration into madness. By the time their fleet reached the fringes of the galaxy, the Emperor's children had become something else. Their vox channels carried music during battle. Their bolter volleys fired in rhythm. Their captains began giving orders not by command, but by melody. The art of war had become literal art, and somewhere, something in the immaterium began to listen. In the silence between stars, a voice began to whisper to Fulgrim. It promised him perfection beyond mortal comprehension. It spoke not of duty, but of beauty. It offered a mirror that reflected every flaw, and the means to erase it, forever. The Emperor's children had set out to prove mankind's supremacy. What they would prove instead was how easily the pursuit of perfection becomes the seed of corruption. Fulgrim, the Phoenician, the illuminator, a Primarch so radiant that mortals mistook him for divinity incarnate. To see him stride across a war-torn plain was to witness perfection given flesh. His voice carried the warmth of command and the weight of destiny. His every gesture promised greatness. Those who served him believed themselves blessed. For who could doubt a leader whose every movement seemed sculpted by the Emperor's own hand? Yet, beneath that immaculate composure, shadows gathered. Fulgrim's pursuit of perfection had become an obsession. He no longer sought excellence for the glory of the Emperor, but for himself, to reflect his own imagined flawlessness back into eternity. His legion mirrored that descent, their brilliance slowly darkening into vanity. They began to measure worth not in victories won, but in the elegance with which they were achieved. The harsh, utilitarian virtues of the Imperium, duty, sacrifice, obedience, were replaced by an aesthetic creed of beauty, refinement, and self-adulation. The Emperor's children would spend hours polishing their armor before battle, engraving their pauldrons with elaborate sigils, tuning the pitch of their bolt weapons to produce a more pleasing report. Some commanders even choreographed combat maneuvers to create visual symmetry when viewed from orbit. They called it tactical artistry. Others simply called it madness. Among their ranks, a quiet schism began to form. Veterans like Captain Saul Tarvitz, stoic, loyal, unwavering, whispered concern among the faithful. They saw how Fulgrim's sermons grew more poetic, more indulgent. They watched him spend hours before mirrors, perfecting his appearance, his armor, his words. He seeks to outshine the Emperor himself. Tarvitz once confided to a chaplain, and the galaxy is not large enough for two suns. But none dared challenge Fulgrim outright. He was their father, their creator, their perfection embodied. And who among them could claim to see the cracks forming in a marble god? It was during the cleansing of the Laren system that the first true shadow fell upon them. The latter were a serpent-like Xenos species, masters of biotechnology and sensual corruption. Their worlds pulsed with alien architecture, organic, pulsating cities that breathed and shuddered as if alive. Even the air carried a sweet, intoxicating scent that fogged the mind. The campaign was swift and brutal. The Emperor's children eradicated the lair with surgical precision, their bolters singing in perfect unison. When the final temple fell, Fulgrim entered it alone. Inside, he found the blade. It was beautiful, impossibly so, forged from a material that seemed to shimmer between liquid and solid. Its surface reflected not light, but desire. Every curve, every pattern, seemed to call to him, promising artistry beyond comprehension. He could feel it hum, as though the weapon recognized him. His warriors would later say he looked entranced, almost reverent, as he lifted it from the altar. The latter blade whispered, though no sound escaped it. It promised mastery, understanding, perfection. Fulgrim felt its weight settle into his hand, as though it had always belonged there. He named it Fireblade. But the name mattered little, for it was already his undoing. From that day, Fulgrim changed. Subtly at first. He spoke in softer tones, as though listening to a music only he could hear. His orders became more elaborate, his tastes more extreme. He began decorating his flagship, the pride of the Emperor, with works of art confiscated from conquered worlds, statues, paintings, instruments, even living performers. His private chambers became a gallery of impossible beauty and unholy indulgence. The blade never left his side. Apothecaries noted that his vitals began to shift. Minor anomalies in his gene seed, erratic neural spikes, an uncharacteristic dilation of the pupils. Yet, none dared question him. He was a Primarch. To imply corruption was to invite death. And so they watched, and they obeyed, and they pretended that their lord's growing eccentricities were but the Manifestations of divine genius. When Fulgrim rejoined the Great Crusade's main fleet, even Horus, War Master of the Imperium, noticed the change. "Brother," Horus told him once, half in jest, "you chase perfection so fiercely that I fear you will outrun even the Emperor." Fulgrim smiled, and for an instant, something alien flickered in his eyes. Perhaps that is the point. That moment, recorded only in fragmented remembrancer accounts, would later be seen as prophecy. The Emperor's children began to drift from their allies. Their warships no longer answered summons promptly. Their Vox transmissions carried strange, harmonic undertones, almost like choral songs. Their astropaths reported vivid dreams, visions of light, music, and ecstasy beyond human comprehension. A few went mad. One tore out his own eyes, crying that he had seen too much beauty to ever look upon reality again. But Fulgrim pressed onward, leading his sons to new worlds, new campaigns, new masterpieces. In his eyes, war had become a performance. The screams of the dying were the chorus, the flash of plasma the stage lighting, the clash of blades the rhythm of a grand, cosmic symphony. Each world they burned became another verse in his aria to perfection. His legion adored him for it. Their discipline became ritual. Their rituals became worship. And the blade, oh, the blade, drank deeply of their devotion. It whispered in his dreams. It showed him visions of a being beyond comprehension, a god of sensation, beauty, and pain intertwined. Fulgrim awoke from those dreams trembling, exhilarated, terrified. Yet every time he tried to cast the weapon aside, it sang to him. It praised him. It loved him. By the time the Emperor's children were summoned to Istvan, their fate was already sealed. Fulgrim's reflection no longer showed a pre-march, it showed a god. And the god was smiling. The world of Laren had fallen silent, but its echoes lingered in Fulgrim's mind like a haunting melody he could never silence. The lyre blade, that exquisite, alien creation, had bonded with him in ways neither he nor his sons fully understood. It was more than a weapon. It was a whisperer, a confidant, a parasite that murmured in the quiet hours when even a Primarch's mind should have found rest. It told him he was beautiful. It told him he was divine. And worst of all, it told him he was right. From that moment on, Fulgrim's perception of the galaxy began to warp. The once sterile corridors of the Pride of the Emperor seemed dull and lifeless. The smell of oil and steel suddenly offensive to his heightened senses. He ordered entire sections of the ship rebuilt, gilded with marble, silk, and gold filigree. Sculptures of his warriors now lined the hallways, not as heroes of the Imperium, but as idols of perfection. Every corridor sang with faint, haunting music, generated by servitors whose vocal cords were replaced with metallic resonators. Even the ship's machine's spirit began to change, humming in tones that resembled laughter. The Legion's warriors followed suit. Astartes who once spent hours honing their marksmanship, now spent equal time tuning the harmony of their bolt gun discharges. Painters, musicians, and poets emerged from within the ranks, their art both beautiful and disturbing. A new term began circulating among them, aesthetes of war. Captain Lucius, known for his flawless swordsmanship, became one of the loudest proponents of this philosophy. His dueling arenas were always crowded, his performances mesmerizing. He fought not to kill, but to perfect, and his pride in his art soon grew into contempt for those who lacked it. A warrior who bleeds without beauty, he declared, is no better than an orc. Saul Tarvitz watched all this with growing unease. His brothers spoke of ecstasy in combat, of sensations so vivid they bordered on divine. He had seen men enter the battlefield laughing and weeping simultaneously, their armor painted in intricate swirls of violet and ivory. The Emperor's children were transforming, slowly, subtly, but undeniably. And though Tarvitz remained loyal to the Emperor, he could feel the pulse of corruption, seeping through every deck of their once proud vessels. The change became undeniable. During the campaign against the Diasporex, a human Xenos coalition that had long evaded imperial compliance, it was a campaign that should have been routine, a straightforward display of the Emperor's will. But for Fulgrim, it became a performance. When the Diasporex fleet appeared, Fulgrim ordered the Pride of the Emperor to close the distance, ignoring the tactical advice of his subcommanders. He wanted to see them, to watch the dance of plasma and steal up close. As his ships exchanged fire, he stood upon the command dais, smiling serenely, as if conducting an orchestra. More power to the forward batteries, he ordered softly. Let the chorus rise. The gunnery decks obeyed. Hundreds of macro cannons roared in rhythmic volleys, perfectly timed to one another. The vibration shook the ship, and yet Fulgrim's voice remained calm, melodic. He adjusted each firing sequence like a composer refining a symphony. When the final Diasporex vessel exploded in a blossom of plasma fire, he whispered, "Exquisite." But the cost had been high. Whole companies of Astartes lay dead, sacrificed for the sake of spectacle. Tarvitz dared to confront him afterward. "My lord," he said, standing before the Primarch's throne, "our casualties were unnecessary. We could have achieved victory with less blood." Fulgrim's eyes, once filled with warmth, turned cold. "And robbed the galaxy of that beauty? You disappoint me, Captain." That was the moment Tarvitz knew. Something inside his father had changed forever. After the Diasporex campaign, the whispers among the fleet grew louder. Some spoke of strange rituals being performed in Fulgrim's private chambers. Others claimed to have heard voices in the corridors at night, voices that spoke in tones too harmonious to be human. A few swore they saw shadows dancing on walls where no light burned. The Legion's librarians, attuned to the warp, began to suffer nightmares. They reported visions of a being cloaked in radiant colors, its form ever-shifting, its laughter both joyous and agonizing. One librarian, overcome by horror, locked himself in his quarters and severed his own psychic link to the warp, muttering, "The song is coming." Meanwhile, the lyre blade continued its work. It seeped into Fulgrim's soul, amplifying his pride, twisting admiration into worship. When Horus finally turned against the Emperor, the weapon's whispers found fertile ground. The War Master's rebellion was already blooming, and Fulgrim, ever drawn to greatness, could not resist being part of what he saw as the ultimate act of creation, reshaping the Imperium itself. When he met with Horus aboard the Vengeful Spirit, those who witnessed the two Primarchs together said they seemed like twin stars in alignment, radiant, terrible, and unstoppable. Fulgrim's voice carried honey and venom in equal measure. He praised Horus's vision, spoke of liberation, of art, of evolution. "The Emperor seeks order," he said softly. "But order is a cage. We were born to create." And in that moment, the lyre blade pulsed with pleasure. Fulgrim returned to his fleet transformed. The next battles he fought were no longer for the Imperium, but for a higher form of beauty, one that demanded blood, ecstasy, and endless sensation. The Emperor's children followed him willingly, their faith shifting from the Emperor of Man to the God who ruled over pleasure itself. Perfection was dead. In its place, indulgence reigned. And somewhere in the warp, Slaanesh, the Prince of Excess, began to smile. Perfection had been their creed. Now it became their curse. By the time the Emperor's children swore themselves to Horus's rebellion, the corruption had taken root in every fiber of their being. They still marched in gleaming ranks, still sang hymns of victory, but those hymns had changed. They were slower, more melodic, almost sensual in their delivery. Their once holy chorales to the Emperor now twisted into praises for sensation itself. The line between discipline and desire was erased. In the beginning, it was subtle. During battle drills, the warriors began to move in rhythm, each motion flowing seamlessly into the next. The sound of bolters firing in perfect harmony became intoxicating. Soon, Astartes began to speak of the feeling of combat, the vibration of their armor under recoil, the ringing clarity of a sword slicing through flesh. What had once been duty became ecstasy. On the pride of the Emperor, Fulgrim encouraged it. He saw the shift not as degradation, but evolution. War, he told his captains, is the highest form of art. The perfection of beauty requires pain. Without suffering, creation is hollow. The Astartes believed him. Saul Tarvitz, ever the loyal son, watched as his brothers began to adorn themselves with trophies, not of honor, but of vanity. Gems encrusted armor plates, feathers and silks hung from pauldrons. Faces were repainted in porcelain-white masks, mouths etched into permanent smiles. In the practice cages, warriors now fought duels that ended only in death, for the mere act of survival was no longer enough. To live beautifully meant to die spectacularly. Lucius the Eternal, though not yet cursed with that name, rose swiftly through the ranks. His dueling arenas had become temples of worship, where the sound of clashing blades mixed with laughter and screams. Lucius saw combat as conversation, his sword strokes a language only the most gifted could understand. When he fought, crowds gathered. Some came to learn, others came to feel, and all left changed. It was in this atmosphere of indulgent artistry that Fulgrim's legion began, their descent from loyal sons to the damned. During the Istvan III campaign, Fulgrim and his captains were ordered to cleanse the planet of loyalist elements. Horus's rebellion had reached its breaking point, and the traitor legions needed to purge their own of those who would not kneel. Fulgrim's heart should have resisted. He had spoken of love for his brothers, of honor and unity. Yet the whispers in his blade were sweet and persuasive. "You are beyond loyalty," they told him, "beyond duty. The Emperor does not deserve your perfection." So Fulgrim obeyed Horus, and damned his sons in the process. Tarvitz and a host of other loyalists were sent planetside under false pretenses. Once they had landed, the traitors opened fire. Virus bombs descended, their canisters cracking open in silent blossoms of green death. Entire battalions were dissolved into screaming clouds of vapor. From orbit, the sight was mesmerizing, a swirl of color across the atmosphere. Beautiful in its horror, Fulgrim watched in silence as his own warriors died. The blade hummed in satisfaction. But Tarvitz survived. By the Emperor's will, his transport had landed deep within the planet's ruined capital. He and a handful of loyalists fought through streets slick with bioslurry and bone dust, rallying survivors from the Death Guard and World Eaters. They broadcasted one final message across the Vox, a warning that the traitors had turned. That act of defiance would echo across history, the first true spark of resistance within the heresy. When Fulgrim learned that Tarvitz yet lived, something human stirred in him. Guilt, perhaps, or pity, but the blade's voice drowned it out. "Perfection requires sacrifice," it whispered. "He is imperfect. You are not." Fulgrim ordered the bombardment resumed. The loyalists on Istvan III fought to the last, their deaths slow and glorious. Even as they burned, their voices filled the Vox with hymns to the Emperor. Fulgrim listened, and for a heartbeat, he envied them. Their devotion was pure, something he no longer understood. He turned away, unable to bear the beauty of their defiance. After Istvan, there was no turning back. The Emperor's children had shed the last of their restraint. They began to experiment with new sensations: sound, light, pain, pleasure, all amplified through warp-borne technology. Artisans crafted instruments that emitted frequencies capable of shattering armor and flesh alike. Apothecaries modified neural implants to heighten sensory feedback. Some warriors replaced their vocal cords entirely, producing sounds that made mortal men convulse in agony or ecstasy. Thus, the earliest noise marines were born. At first, their transformation was seen as divine, a new stage of evolution. But soon it became grotesque. Their armor pulsed and writhed like living flesh. Their screams became weapons. Their laughter broke minds. When they unleashed their sonic blasters, enemies didn't just die, they disintegrated, reduced to ribbons of vibrating meat. And yet, the Emperor's children saw only art in the carnage. Fulgrim walked among them, radiant and terrible. His face shone with unholy beauty. His voice like a chorus of angels twisted through static. The lyre blade was no longer just a weapon. It was his conscience, his companion, his god. He no longer served the Emperor. He served perfection itself, and perfection demanded agony. Tarvitz's last transmission from Istvan would haunt the Imperium for centuries. "Tell the Emperor, his children are lost." And so they were. There are few sounds in the galaxy as terrifying or as mesmerizing as the war cries of the Emperor's children, once they fully embraced Slaanesh. It is not a shout of rage or courage. It is a symphony, a twisted concert of pleasure, an agony woven together into something that feels almost divine, until it tears your mind apart. By the time of the Siege of Terra, the Emperor's children were unrecognizable. Their purple armor shimmered with oily hues, rippling as if alive. Their helmets no longer resembled those of Astartes. They were elongated, shaped into grinning visages or featureless masks. Tubes snaked from their throats into amplifiers embedded in their armor, translating every breath into sound waves that could kill. They had become living instruments of the Dark Prince. When they descended upon human worlds, they did not simply conquer, they performed. Cities burned in harmony to the beat of their weapons. Civilians were gathered into arenas and forced to witness performances where death was slow and orchestrated. A single pull of a trigger would produce a note, a chord, a scream, each carefully tuned for maximum resonance. The lucky ones died instantly. The others became part of the show. Lucius, now drunk on his own skill and vanity, had become the embodiment of this new madness. He challenged champions across the galaxy, always ensuring his battles were witnessed. Defeat was unthinkable, for each victory was a masterpiece. Each kill another stroke of his blade's artistry. But with each duel, something inside him decayed. His obsession with perfection turned inward. The slightest scar, the smallest flaw, all filled him with hatred. Fulgrim watched his sons and felt pride and revulsion. He too had changed beyond mortal comprehension. The demon blade he had carried since Laren no longer whispered. It sang. It promised him ascension, perfection beyond flesh. And Fulgrim, in his hubris, believed he could master it. But the truth was darker. The weapon had been shaping him all along, feeding on his vanity and guiding his every act. During the Horus Heresy, when Fulgrim faced the pre-March Ferrus Manus, his dearest friend and brother, the trap was complete. The two met in battle during the massacre at Istvan V. Ferrus's hammer met Fulgrim's blade, sparks flying in showers of light. The clash of their weapons echoed across the valley like the tolling of doom. Fulgrim hesitated for a heartbeat. He saw Ferrus, proud, loyal, unyielding, and in that instant, he remembered the man he once was. The perfectionist who sought beauty through devotion to the Emperor. The artist, not the monster. And that moment of clarity was his undoing. The demon within the blade struck, taking control. Fulgrim's hand moved of its own accord. In one terrible swing, he decapitated his brother. Ferrus's body crumpled at his feet, and Fulgrim screamed, not in triumph, but in horror. The demon laughed, its voice now echoing within his soul. Fulgrim tried to destroy the sword, but it was too late. The entity inside it surged forward, wrapping him in coils of psychic energy. His flesh warped, his eyes shone with impossible color, and his voice became a chorus of unholy harmonies. In that moment, Fulgrim the pre-March was gone, and in his place stood Fulgrim, the demon prince of Slaanesh. He became both beautiful and horrifying to behold. His hair flowed like liquid silver. His wings glistened with a sheen of living silk, and his face radiated an unbearable allure. To gaze upon him was to risk madness. Under his rule, the Emperor's children abandoned all semblance of military order. They became nomads of the warp, drifting between systems and vast, rotting cruisers filled with screams and song. Their ships, once paragons of design, were now floating cathedrals of excess. Inside, demonic choirs sang endlessly while apothecaries experimented on living subjects to find new heights of sensation. They pillaged worlds not for resources, but for experiences. They sought the rarest sounds, the most exquisite agonies. Their raids were unpredictable, their motives incomprehensible. They killed without purpose, created art from destruction, and worshipped their pain as proof of existence. To the wider Imperium, they became a nightmare whispered among soldiers, the noise marines, the lovers of pain, the choir of the damned. And worst of all, they did not kill in hatred. They killed in joy. When the Emperor's children appeared in orbit, planetary governors knew their end would not be swift. Vox recordings recovered from their attacks contained fragments of their music distorted, frequencies that drive men insane. Some victims clawed out their eyes or ears to escape the sound, only to find the noise echoing inside their skulls. Others begged to be taken, desperate to understand the ecstasy that consumed their tormentors. There are records, censored by the Inquisition, of worlds where the entire population fell into frenzied madness after hearing the Emperor's children's choirs. No weapon of the Mechanicus could silence it. Even Exterminatus left echoes of that unholy sound drifting through the void. And so the once noble sons of Fulgrim became a lesson written in blood and melody. Perfection pursued without restraint becomes corruption without end. To this day, Fulgrim and his legion roam the Eye of Terror, eternal slaves to their own craving. Each battle, each scream, each note of their terrible music brings them closer to the moment they will never reach. The perfect performance. For the Emperor's children, there is no victory, no redemption. Only the endless pursuit of a beauty that destroys everything it touches. The void around their flagship, the pride of the Emperor, shimmered with color, not the cold black of space, but a shifting kaleidoscope of impossible hues. This was the Eye of Terror, where reality itself was torn open and twisted by the will of the Chaos Gods. Here, the Emperor's children thrived. Here, they were free to indulge every whisper of desire without limit or consequence. Yet for those aboard, there was no true peace, only escalation. Every corridor pulsed with sound. Walls throbbed like veins. Light fixtures pulsed in time with the beat of music that never stopped. Servitors writhed in agony as their metallic limbs were repurposed into instruments. Flesh met steel, sound became touch, and agony became faith. At the heart of this labyrinth was the Symphonium Obscura, the great chamber of the Noise Marines, a vast hall filled with sonic weaponry, resonant engines, and suspended cages containing the living and the damned. The air shimmered with vibrations powerful enough to liquefy human organs. Lucius the Eternal stood before them all, his body a tapestry of scars, stitches, and gold filigree. He was more than a warrior now. He was an obsession given form. Every duel, every act of violence etched itself into his skin. The faces of those he killed lingered there, twisting and whispering, waiting for their chance. For the curse that bound Lucius was cruel and perfect. Whoever killed him would become him. As he addressed his gathered legionnaires, his voice split into several tones, one human, one mechanical, and one demonic. "Brothers," he said, smiling faintly, "Fulgrim calls. A world of mortals has crafted symphonies that claim to mimic the divine. Shall we not show them what true perfection sounds like?" A chorus of laughter erupted. It was not joy but hunger, the anticipation of an audience, awaiting their next masterpiece. The chosen planet was Malchior IV, a prosperous hive world known for its art guilds and grand theaters. The Emperor's children viewed it as an insult, a world that dared to celebrate beauty without worshipping Slaanesh. Within hours, warp storms enveloped the system, and the pride of the Emperor emerged from unreality like a serpent shedding its skin. The invasion began not with orbital bombardment, but with music. The Noise Marines tuned their weapons, sonic blasters, doom sirens, and cacophonic amplifiers, and began their performance. Cities shook. Skyscrapers shattered like glass under the pressure of invisible sound waves. Vox systems bled static as the planet's communication network became an unwilling instrument. In their grand orchestra of ruin, those who survived the initial barrage stumbled through the streets, clutching their heads. Blood poured from their eyes and ears. Then came the warriors, resplendent in armor of violet and gold, each stride timed with the rhythm of destruction. Their laughter harmonized with the screams of their victims. One Noise Marine, Varist, carried a modified blastmaster that emitted frequencies designed to stimulate the pleasure centers of the brain while simultaneously tearing neurons apart. As he fired into a crowd, his Vox grill expanded into a grin. "They love it," he crooned. "They feel it." Lucius moved through the chaos like a dancer, cutting through soldiers and civilians alike. He fought not for conquest, but for expression, each kill a brushstroke, each death a crescendo. His armor pulsed with the faces of the damned, each one screaming in silence, their agony his eternal audience. Meanwhile, high above the planet, Fulgrim watched. His throne room was a vision of twisted majesty, marble that bled, statues that moaned, chandeliers made of human spines. His demon wings unfurled, casting shimmering shadows across the floor. Around him, demons of Slaanesh slithered and sang, each voice a harmony of praise and mockery. Fulgrim's eyes closed as he felt the psychic waves of slaughter wash over him. Every scream, every note of agony fed him. But beneath the ecstasy, a faint sorrow stirred. For all their brilliance, all their beauty, his sons could create nothing lasting. Every masterpiece burned, every triumph decayed. It was the curse of Slaanesh. Perfection was always just beyond reach. On the surface, the planetary defense forces rallied for a final stand in the grand amphitheater of Malchior, a structure built for operas and symphonies, now repurposed as a fortress. Thousands of soldiers, priests, and civilians huddled behind barricades as the Noise Marines advanced. The defenders' commander, Colonel Resk, gave his final order: mute the Vox. Silence everything. The sound is their weapon. For a moment, there was peace, a silence so profound that it felt sacred. Then the Emperor's children arrived. They did not breach the walls through force, but resonance. The very stone vibrated until it cracked. Windows shattered inward. The defenders screamed as their own armor plates resonated and exploded. Lucius walked into the amphitheater, blade drawn. "You built this place for song," he said softly. "Now it will echo for eternity." When the slaughter ended, the Emperor's children stood among the corpses, breathing heavily, drunk on their own performance. The amphitheater's acoustics had amplified every scream perfectly. Lucius bowed his head and whispered, "Perfection." Fulgrim's laughter echoed through the warp, and for a fleeting instant, even the Dark Prince seemed amused. But somewhere deep within the pride of the Emperor, a single mortal prisoner still lived. Bound to a resonant crucifix, they began to hum, softly, off-key. The sound displeased the Noise Marines. Yet Fulgrim turned his head. "Let them sing," he murmured. "Imperfection has its charm." And so, amid the endless noise of madness, one fragile human voice sang defiantly into the void. A reminder that even in damnation, the echo of humanity sometimes lingers. Days after the massacre of Malchior IV, the echoes of its destruction still drifted. Through the warp, songs of despair and rapture intertwined. The Emperor's children had moved on, leaving behind a world reduced to silence. No living voice remained, only the residual hum of sonic devastation, vibrating in the planet's crust like a cursed melody. But for the Noise Marines, there could be no stillness. Silence was unbearable. In silence, they could hear their own thoughts, and that, above all, was their greatest torment. Aboard the Pride of the Emperor, the crew and warbands celebrated their performance. Demonettes danced upon shifting marble floors, their movements blurring the line between seduction and slaughter. Mortal slaves, deafened and mutilated, served wine distilled from the blood of the fallen. Lucius reclined in his chamber, his armor whispering. Every voice embedded within him begged for release. He smiled. "You will sing again soon," he said to them. Lucius's chamber was filled with trophies, helms of slain champions, shards of mirror-polished ceramite, strings of vocal cords preserved in crystalline jars. Yet his attention was fixed upon a single relic, the head of a loyalist space marine captain from the Salamander's chapter. The face was still frozen in a look of defiance, its skin turned to a glassy sheen. "You should have stayed silent," Lucius whispered. "But you screamed." "You all do." The door opened with a hiss. A figure entered, Fabius Bile, once the chief apothecary of the Emperor's children, now something far worse. His robes were dark, lined with surgical tools and vials filled with glowing fluids. His pale face bore the same look of scholarly detachment he had worn since the days before the heresy. Lucius's grin widened. "Ah, Fabius, come to congratulate me on my art." Bile sneered. "Your art is decay, Lucius. You drown in it and call it beauty. I come because Fulgrim commands it." Lucius rose slowly. "Our father still remembers me. I'm touched." "Don't be. He requires something of you," Bile said. "A world in the veiled expanse sings with strange frequencies, unnatural harmonics that even demons cannot explain. Fulgrim wishes to hear it. You will lead a warband to investigate." Lucius tilted his head. "And what do you seek, old butcher?" "The same thing I always seek," Bile replied coldly. "Knowledge. There may be a resonance beyond even Slaanesh's reach." For a moment, Lucius was silent. Then he laughed. "A new song, then. Perhaps even I can learn a new note." As preparations began, the Pride of the Emperor drifted through the warp toward the veiled expanse, a region where the boundaries between real space and the immaterium blurred like oil upon water. The ship's choir decks screamed with anticipation. Demons coiled within the engines, feeding on the vibrations of the warp itself. When they emerged from the storm, the target world awaited them, a dead planet wrapped in auroras of sound. Its surface shimmered, rippling like liquid glass. Vox readings fluctuated wildly, broadcasting haunting melodies that defied all logic. Lucius stood upon the viewing deck, watching the planet's surface pulse. "It sings," he whispered. "Beautiful." Bile frowned. "Do not be deceived. That song is not made by mortals." Landing parties descended in Baroque dropships, their hulls engraved with screaming faces. When the ramps opened, the Marines found themselves surrounded by crystalline planes that reflected distorted versions of their own visages. Each step they took produced faint notes, as if the very ground were alive. The deeper they advanced, the louder the music became, an otherworldly chorus that resonated within their armor and bones. Some Marines removed their helmets, desperate to hear more clearly. Those who did soon began to convulse, clutching at their heads as their skulls vibrated. Their screams became part of the melody. Lucius smiled at the carnage. Perfection takes sacrifice. Then they reached the center, a pit surrounded by obsidian monoliths, each inscribed with symbols that flickered between imperial Gothic and demonic script. At its heart stood a single figure, pale, thin, and radiant, neither human nor demon. It turned toward them, eyes gleaming with infinite sorrow. "You should not have come," it said, its voice a chord of 1,000 tones. Lucius raised his blade. "We go where the song leads." The being extended its arms. The ground erupted with sound, pure, overwhelming, holy and profane all at once. Noise Marines screamed as their weapons melted into their flesh, merging them into grotesque instruments. Bile stumbled backward, clutching his ears, muttering, "Impossible. It's alive." The figure stepped closer. "You seek perfection," it whispered. "Then be part of it." Lucius lunged, and for the first time in centuries, hesitation flickered across his face. This was not beauty. This was not art. It was truth, raw and unbearable. His blade passed through the being's form. But the moment it did, he felt something pull at him. His memories, his vanity, his identity, all unraveling into sound. He screamed, and the scream became a note that joined the planet's eternal chorus. When Fulgrim's psychic senses reached the world, he felt it, the melody of loss, the echo of his son's voice merging with something greater. For the first time since his ascension, the demon Primarch felt a flicker of fear. He turned from the viewing pool and whispered, "Perhaps perfection has found us." The veiled expanse became silent once more. No Vox transmission returned from Lucius's expedition. The only thing that reached the pride of the Emperor was a low, steady hum, the same tone that had consumed the world below. It vibrated through the ship's hull, resonating in the bones of every mortal aboard. Fabius Bile stood upon the command deck, watching the cursed planet through the observation dome. Its surface shimmered, the auroras now pulsing in a slow rhythm, almost like a heartbeat. "He's gone," Bile muttered. "Consumed or transcended. Does it matter?" Behind him, a soft, musical laughter echoed. Fulgrim materialized in a shimmer of violet light, his serpentine lower body coiled elegantly. Upon the marble floor, the air shimmered around him with a perfume that dulled the mind and loosened the soul. His voice was both gentle and terrible. "Every son returns to me eventually," Fabius, Fulgrim said. "Even in dissolution, Lucius serves the song." Bile did not look at him. "You call this service? You've lost another of your prized creations." "Lost?" Fulgrim's many eyes glimmered. "No, he is part of the melody now. He is the melody." Bile finally turned. "And if that melody turns against you, what then?" "You forget, demon, the warp does not sing for you. It sings for itself." Fulgrim smiled, amused by the apothecary's insolence. "You still think in terms of control and containment. You are a scientist in a realm ruled by sensation. Tell me, what is the difference between creation and destruction when both are beautiful?" Bile's expression hardened. "Beauty is a disease, Fulgrim. You are merely its most perfect carrier." The demon prince laughed softly. "And yet you cannot stop studying me." He reached out, brushing a claw against Bile's cheek. The touch was almost tender, but Bile recoiled. The air shimmered again, and Fulgrim's form dissolved into a cloud of perfumed light, leaving only his voice behind. "Go, Fabius. Seek your truths. But remember, everything you build, every experiment you conduct, will always belong to me." Bile stood alone, breathing hard. Around him, the ship's walls trembled as the hum grew louder. Vox channels began to crackle with faint whispers. Lucius's voice, distorted and overlapping with thousands of others. Perfection, perfection. Hear me, Father. We are one. We are sound. I see it now, the final note. Crew members fell to their knees, clutching their helmets as blood trickled from their ears. Even the noise marines began to twitch and convulse, their armor vibrating uncontrollably. The resonance from the planet below was infecting them, rewriting their flesh with living frequency. While shouted into the Vox, cut power to all sonic amplifiers. Now, too late. The song from Malchier's Death World had returned. But this time it was different, colder, sharper. It had evolved. The entire ship began to resonate as if it were an instrument, each deck producing a distinct tone. Lights flickered in perfect rhythm, forming patterns across the walls. Then, amidst the chaos, a figure stepped out of a shadowed corridor. It was Lucius, or rather, something wearing Lucius's shape. His armor glowed faintly, covered in mirrored glass that reflected countless versions of himself. His eyes burned with amethyst light, and when he spoke, his voice carried a harmonic that made the air ripple. "Miss me, brothers?" he asked. The gathered noise marines fell silent. Even demons paused, sensing the change. Ball approached carefully. "You are not Lucius." Lucius smiled, and every mirror on the ship fractured. "No," he said, "I am the echo that remains. The perfection he became." He raised his hand. The air screamed. Metal groaned as the ship's spine warped under invisible pressure. Marines fell, their armor fusing to their skin as sound energy flayed them alive. The noise reached frequencies beyond comprehension, not just heard, but felt in the soul. Fulgrim reappeared, emerging through the storm like a god descending into his cathedral. His beauty was terrible, radiant wings unfurled, eyes blazing with fury and awe. "What are you?" Fulgrim demanded. The echo of Lucius tilted his head. "I am your masterpiece, Father." The song made flesh. "You sought perfection. I bring it to you." The ship convulsed. Through the warp-torn void, demons screamed as their forms began to unravel. The song was not of Slaanesh. It was beyond him, something older, something pure in its purpose of annihilation through unity. Fulgrim roared, his voice shaking the ship. "You dare challenge the Prince of Pleasure?" Lucius's echo spread his arms. "No, Father. I fulfill him." The two forces collided in a psychic storm of light and sound. Fulgrim's whip lashed through the void, cutting through the echoes of reality, while Lucius's harmonic scream shattered the walls of the immaterium. The clash birthed waves that traveled for light years, the music of a god warring with his creation. When the storm ended, the pride of the Emperor was gone. Only silence remained, and in that silence, somewhere deep within the warp, a faint melody lingered, soft and beautiful beyond words. Fabius Bile, aboard his personal ship miles away, stared into the void where Fulgrim's flagship had been. "They've done it," he whispered. "They've found the perfect note, and it killed them all." For a moment, even the warp seemed to listen. Silence. True silence. Not the absence of sound, but the death of it. Across the void where the pride of the Emperor once drifted, even the warp was mute. No whispers, no demonic laughter. Not even the hum of background madness that defined the Eye of Terror. It was as if existence itself held its breath. Then, faintly, something began to move. Shattered fragments of Fulgrim's flagship drifted through the stillness, their golden hulls reflecting impossible colors. Some pieces were enormous, the size of small cities, while others were delicate slivers of glass and metal. Each fragment pulsed faintly, like a dying heart. From one of those fragments came a flicker of light. It was Lucius. His body floated amid the debris, motionless but intact. The mirrored plates that had once covered him were now fused into his flesh. His armor no longer bore the violet and gold of the Emperor's children. It shimmered with translucent iridescence, reflecting nothing and everything at once. He stirred, slowly, and when his eyes opened, no light escaped them. Lucius drew in a breath that sounded like the exhale of a dying god. The void around him trembled. In his chest, something pulsed, not a heart, but a resonant core of pure sound. His voice, when it came, was little more than a whisper. Perfection is never silent. Around him, The fragments began to vibrate. Bits of steel and marble merged together, drawn toward his body. The echoes of the song, that impossible melody birthed from the confrontation between demon and echo, now pulsed in the air. Slowly, the fragments formed into a new shape, a structure that resembled a cathedral, built from the bones of a ship and the dreams of a god. Lucius drifted toward it, bare feet touching the surface. As he walked through its halls, ghostly shapes appeared, his brothers, his legion. Noise marines, twisted and beautiful, stood along the aisles like statues. But their eyes were empty. They were not truly there. They were memories, resonant imprints of those consumed by the final performance. Lucius smiled. All of you, part of me now. He reached the altar at the center, a throne made of broken instruments and severed limbs, all fused together in elegant symmetry. Upon it lay a figure, Fulgrim, or rather, what remained of him. The demon Primarch's serpentine body was now stone, his face frozen in perfect ecstasy and agony intertwined. His wings had turned to crystalline structures that hummed faintly, producing the same tone that had silenced the warp. Lucius knelt before him. You achieved it, Father. You became beauty itself, too perfect to move, too divine to live. He rose, touching the statue's cheek. But even statues can sing. He pressed his hand against Fulgrim's chest. The crystal pulsed, once, twice, then cracked. A wave of energy rippled through the cathedral, filling the air with sound. It was not the corrupted music of the noise marines, nor the demonic shrieks of the warp. It was something hauntingly pure. A choir of unseen voices joined it. Human, Astartes, demon, all singing together, their tones blending into one endless, rising note. Lucius closed his eyes, and for the first time since his corruption, tears fell. I hear it now, he whispered. The beauty in failure, the perfection in imperfection. He turned, his face serene. Around him, the spectral forms of his legion began to fade, each dissolving into light. Their armor melted away, their voices joining the choir until the cathedral itself became sound incarnate. The last to vanish was Fulgrim's statue. As it disintegrated, a faint whisper echoed through the void. My son, you were always the truest artist. Lucius smiled faintly. And you, Father, were my greatest canvas. The cathedral began to ascend, its structure unraveling into ribbons of light that vanished into the warp. Wherever they passed, the silence broke. Demons screamed again, stars flared, and reality shuddered. But now there was a new undertone beneath it all, a faint, perfect hum that no one could quite place. In the following centuries, imperial ships passing near the veiled expanse would report strange phenomena. Vox systems would pick up soft, harmonic tones that drove crews to tears or madness. Some said they could hear voices within, whispers of long-dead warriors speaking, of beauty and horror intertwined. Others claimed that if you listened closely, you could hear the voice of Lucius the Eternal, still singing, still seeking perfection. The Inquisition declared the region a forbidden zone. All records of the pride of the emperor and the resonant cathedrals were purged from official archives. But among the heretics of the Dark Mechanicum, rumors persisted. They spoke of a god song, a melody that could reshape matter, unmake demons, and bring entire worlds to ecstasy or despair. They called it the Symphony of Fulgrim. And somewhere, deep within the warp, where sound and flesh were one, Lucius smiled. For he had not died. He had simply become the music itself. Centuries passed. Empires rose and fell. Wars flared and were forgotten. But in the distant reaches of the warp, beyond even the madness of Slaanish's domain, a faint song continued to echo, too soft to hear, yet impossible to ignore. The Symphony of Fulgrim had become legend among those who still dared whisper the name. Emperor's children. It was said that those who sought perfection in sound or art could sometimes hear it faintly, like a heartbeat behind reality itself. Others dismissed it as a myth, a cautionary tale told to new cultists about the price of chasing divine beauty. But deep within the eye of terror, a gathering began. In a cavernous palace built from crystallized screams, a conclave of noise lords assembled. Each was a master of sensory torment, their weapons crafted from human vocal cords, their armor alive with the pulse of sound. They knelt before a single throne. The throne was empty, until it wasn't. With a pulse like a bass drop from the birth of stars, Lucius appeared. Not as flesh and bone, nor as demon or man. He was form and music intertwined, his edges flickering between physical and ethereal, his every movement leaving behind ripples of resonance. The noise lords trembled. Some screamed. Some wept. A few laughed uncontrollably, their minds unable to contain the beauty of what they beheld. Lucius smiled. "Did you think death could silence me?" he said, his voice an orchestra of layered tones. "Did you think perfection ends when flesh fails?" He stepped forward. Wherever his feet touched the marble floor, it sang, pure notes that harmonized perfectly with his words. "I have seen the truth beyond sensation. Slaanish's hunger is but the echo of what we once were. We sought pleasure, but pleasure is hollow. We sought perfection, but perfection is endless." He spread his hands, and around him the air rippled, revealing glimpses of the resonant cathedral, rebuilt, floating once again in the warp. "Fulgrim sleeps, but I have found a way to wake him. Through sound, not worship. Through creation, not corruption." A daring voice rose from the kneeling noise marines. "My lord, the galaxy burns. The Imperium fractures. Why return now?" Lucius's smile widened, though it was not kind. "Because chaos is the greatest stage of all." He descended from the throne and placed a hand on the soldier's helm. The armor began to vibrate violently, each molecule trembling with sound. "Do you not hear it?" Lucius whispered. "Every explosion, every scream, every heartbeat. The universe begs to sing again." The marine's body disintegrated, transforming into a burst of harmonic energy that scattered through the air like shattered glass. The others bowed their heads in reverence or fear. Lucius turned toward them all. "We will return to the stars, not as conquerors, but as composers. Every world will become an instrument, every life a note, until the galaxy itself becomes one perfect song." And so began the refrain crusade. Warp storms parted as the Emperor's children emerged once more. But these were not the same hedonistic warriors of old. Their weapons no longer merely tortured. They reshaped. Their sonic blasters could liquefy metal or sculpt it into perfect forms. Their voices could bend light, twist gravity, and ignite flesh into luminous fire. World after world fell, not to invasion, but to performance. Planets awoke to skies filled with shimmering auroras and unearthly music that no ear could bear, yet no soul could resist. Some populations danced until their bodies broke. Others simply knelt and sang until their voices gave out. The Imperium called them the symphonic heresy. The Ordo Hereticus dispatched inquisitorial fleets. Yet whenever they arrived, they found only silence and beauty, entire worlds transformed into crystalline landscapes, every living being frozen mid-song, their faces locked in rapture. Whispers spread even among chaos itself. The servants of Khorne raged, calling Lucius a blasphemer. The followers of Tzeentch sought to decipher his melodies. Even the demons of Slaanish trembled, unsure whether their master rejoiced or feared this new perfection. In the depths of the warp, Slaanish watched and smiled. Lucius's creation was both devotion and defiance. It was the purest act of worship, to create something that rivaled even a god's beauty. But gods are jealous, and in that jealousy, the warp began to twist once more. As Lucius stood atop his resplendent flagship, the rebuilt pride of the Emperor, he gazed into the endless storm of color and sound around him. A voice whispered from the void, smooth and cruel. "My child, your song has reached me." Lucius bowed his head, eyes closed. "Then you understand it." "Oh, I understand. But perfection, my son, is mine alone." The air trembled. The stars flickered. Lucius's smile remained calm, but his voice trembled with both awe and defiance. "Then come, Divine One," he said softly. "Let us see whose art endures." And from the heart of the warp, the god of excess stirred. The stage was set for a final symphony, the duel between creator and creation, beauty and divinity, silence and song. The galaxy would never be the same. The warp shuddered. Every color bled into its opposite, every sound folded into silence. Across the galaxy, psychers screamed as their minds caught a fragment of the coming storm. The song that had awakened Slaanish was spreading, but the god's response was unlike anything the mortal or immortal mind could conceive. Lucius stood on the bridge of the pride of the Emperor, surrounded by 1,000 choir serfs grafted to their instruments. They were no longer men or women, but extensions of the ship's living orchestra. Each pulse of their hearts sent vibrations through the vessel's hull, harmonizing with Lucius's every breath. He raised his hand. "Begin." The ship sang. Its cannons roared not with thunder, but with music, frequencies so pure that they cut through reality itself. Every blast shattered time, folding seconds and hours into shimmering chords. Ships of the Imperial Navy that had arrived to stop him were annihilated in silence, their hulls melting into glass-like ribbons that fluttered away in the vacuum. And then, the stars went dark. From that infinite blackness came her. Slaanesh, the Prince of Pleasure, the Lord of Excess, the eternal temptation, not in form, but in essence. Reality trembled as her presence flooded every atom, every neuron, every sound wave. Those who heard her voice wept blood from both joy and terror. Lucius fell to one knee, not from fear, but from the unbearable beauty of her arrival. "My divine," he said, his voice fractured into echoes. "You heard my song." "I did," she whispered, her tone both tender and cruel. "It was exquisite, but it is incomplete." Lucius's smile returned, a fragile thing. "Perfection is never complete. That is its nature." "You speak as though you understand perfection better than I," Slaanesh hissed, her form now coalescing into a vision of shifting genders and faces, every possible incarnation of beauty, all at once. Lucius raised his head, his eyes reflecting the glow of his god. "I understand that you made me to seek it, to crave it, and I have found it, not in you, but in the act of creation itself." The warp screamed. "Blasphemy," she said, but her tone was curious. "You dare to rival me?" Lucius rose to his feet, his armor vibrating with resonance. The very metal sang in defiance. "Not rival. Reflect. What is beauty if not the mirror of divinity?" Slaanesh extended a hand, and galaxies cracked under her gesture. "Then show me, child. Show me what you call perfection." Lucius bowed, and the pride of the Emperor ignited. Its engines pulsed like organs. Its hull unfolded, revealing vast speaker arrays the size of cathedrals. The music began again, but this time, it was not for mortals. It was a challenge to a god. The opening chords were a dirge of creation, the echo of stars being born. Then came the melody of decay, of suns dying, of empires collapsing into ash. Each note carried history, sorrow, and triumph, every scream, ever uttered by humanity woven into one impossible harmony. Slaanesh watched, silent. The god's lips parted slightly as the music reached a crescendo. Even demons froze in place, unable to comprehend what they felt. For a moment, a flicker of eternity, the Prince of Pleasure felt awe. And then Slaanesh struck. A wave of divine power shattered Lucius's masterpiece. The choir serfs burst like overripe fruit. The decks of the ship splintered under invisible pressure. Warp lightning tore across the void. Lucius fell backward, laughing even as his armor cracked. "You destroy beauty as easily as you birth it, because I am its source." Slaanesh appeared before him, radiant and monstrous. Her face was Fulgrim's, then Lucius's, then every soul that had ever worshipped her. "You cannot exist without me. You are mine." Lucius raised his hand, trembling, and from his gauntlet projected a final chord, pure and endless. The sound pierced even the god's essence. For the first time since the dawn of corruption, Slaanesh screamed. Reality shattered. Warp and materium twisted together, collapsing into a single blinding void. When the light faded, the god was gone. So was the ship. Only silence remained. But silence in the warp is never empty. Within that silence, a faint echo lingered, Lucius's voice, whispering words only a few would ever hear. "Perfection is not to be found, my divine. It is to be sung." Across the eye of terror, that whisper seated itself in dreams. In music, in the beating of hearts. And once again, the Emperor's children stirred. But this time, they did not scream. They listened.